Hello and welcome to the Anarchist Experience. If you're not familiar with the Atheist Experience and what it is, you can check that out. Just Google it. Anyway, basically what they do is they answer questions from religious people about atheism. And what we are going to be doing here on the Anarchist Experience is we are going to be answering questions that people have about anarchy and about specifically anarcho-capitalism. So if you have questions that you would like to have answered, please feel free to pull up my Facebook page and send me a message, and hopefully I'll be able to answer those. That's only for today. Next week we're hoping to finally get the call-in system working so that you'll actually be able to call in and talk to us live on the air over the phone. Today I've got who I believe I'm recruiting to be my co-host for the show on a regular basis. I'd like to have Daniel Rothschild join me, and he is here as a guest to also discuss these questions that that people have about anarcho-capitalism and how it would work. So we do have quite a few questions to look at, but first I do want to say welcome, Daniel, and thanks for joining me.
Anytime. Thank you for having me on.
So, I understand that you had quite a few questions posted on your particular thread there.
Mm-hmm.
I only got a few on mine, but really, we're looking at so many questions so far that I think, given the time, we're probably going to run out before we answer them all. So, I guess let's just go ahead and go into the first question that you got there.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have when can we stop talking about anarchy?
I think you was being facetious. I responded on it actually, and my answer is when we have anarchy.
Actually, I don't believe that we could stop talking about it then either. I think that it's an important and inherent topic to teach children and to teach adults that yes, the idea of you having someone who is a ruler over you is inappropriate, and teaching people to be, autonomous people, glorious people in their own right, who are willing to take the responsibilities for their actions and also take the initiative for their own actions, to enjoy the benefits of their own actions, to feel the consequences of their own actions. I think that it's something that you can't stop talking about.
Okay.
You disagree on that one?
No.
No? All right. Well then, let's see here. Moving on. Are there any substantial historical precedents that suggest the merit of anarchy? Well, got to pull out my good old Google.
That's a very short answer. Yes.
History. Let's see. Anarcho-capitalism in history.
You have people like Peter Leeson and David Freeman and Bruce Benson. I think are just three people who have given empirical evidence to show that anarchist societies have existed. They've been peaceful. You've had people like Tom Woods who talk about how the Wild West was actually not so wild.
Yeah. Well, the not so wild West is definitely a good one. Well, as far as I understand it, there was about 1,000 years or so in Ireland that was considered to be anarchic, in that there wasn't a particular ruler per se that owned other people or could subjugate other people. Looks like Victor may be joining us, so we may have a second guest here on the Anarchist Experience. Victor is checking things out, and I guess I'll go ahead and mute that up so we don't have beeping popping in. All right, so then realistically, if we go back in time, though, before the establishment of religions and so on, we can actually see that historically the human being function under a variety of different social structures, and some of these were going to be in agricultural, agrarian societies, and then other people lived in a hunter-gatherer type of society. And in some groups, they had a ruler, so to speak, who was the head of the tribe, and he told everybody to do whatever he wanted, and they did it. But there were also Native American tribes and other tribes in history that had leadership that was basically would provide recommendations and advice and insight, and they weren't rulers; they were just advisors, and they were respected elders, and they provided their positions on various different things. Now, some people would say that that was governance, but not government. But yes, there have been a lot of different examples through history. I would even cite some of the California cities back in the Wild Wild West, where you had private policing, you had private fire departments, you had private roads, you had private everything. Nobody owned any of that in a globalist, like, public-owned good. It was everybody owned their own stuff and paid for their own things, and if you made a claim for, let's say, gold, trying to find gold, gold panning and things like that, then you would make your claim, and you would either defend it yourself or you would have someone defend it for you. And there were actually institutions that would go about making sure that people's claims were respected. And these institutions were not government. They were all private. So in any case, I do welcome Victor Pross for joining us here at the Anarchist Experience, and I'm going to have to get used to saying that one because I'm so used to saying the Atheist Experience, but yeah. Are there other... actually, Victor, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you. I'm walking in the middle of the movie, so I have to be caught up on...
We just started.
We just started.
Oh,
it is
okay.
the second sexiest man on YouTube. No offense, Robert. Come on the show.
Well,
so
I guess
what are we talking about today?
What was that?
What are we talking about today?
Well, the first question was, when can we stop talking about anarchy? Daniel said that when we have anarchy, we can stop talking about it, and I said that it's actually a critical, fundamental human concept that people need to continue to understand, that they are the ruler of themselves, that they should not have a ruler over them, and this is something that we should never stop talking about.
Ah, yeah.
And your opinion?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to create the language to shape the ideas, which are not taken for granted. I absolutely agree, but if the society or the world ever reached the apotheosis of a totally free society at some point, they would just take it for granted. They wouldn't be they wouldn't walking around saying, "Hello, my fellow anarchist brother. How are you today?" "Well, I'm fine, thank you." "Would you like to go out for a cup of tea?" "Well, so long as it's voluntary." "Yes, we're praising voluntarism today." But in the meantime, though, like these words have to be driven home, and that's why I think that the word voluntarism is getting a lot of mileage these days, just to drive the point home. Because anarchism or anarchy has such a lot of scary connotations around it, and with the new renewed generated interest in anarchist thought, that's why words like voluntarism are given new life, even though the word goes back to the 17 or 18th century English UK intellectuals who were kind of like the nebulous of breaking away from that form of government, which eventually became the United States of America. But there was the voluntarists who were speaking up against the whole idea, for example, of a public education, of which you and I, Robert, were talking about on some other show. But yeah, no, like, is this something that's in dispute, or is it?
Well, it's just a question that was posed to us.
I think the person who posted it was being a bit glib. He's like, shut up already. When do we have to stop hearing about anarchy? I don't think it was a legitimate question. You know, it's like someone
Yeah, yeah,
asking,
but
"When are you going to stop asking me out?"
Yeah.
The answer is after we have sex. You know?
Well, that's
yeah,
harsh.
yeah. No, it might be the. You ever notice that that's really something that's characteristic of religion, let's say, or a religious mindset. I mean, you really can't have two Christians talking with each other without the word Jesus Christ popping up 200 times in between the dialogue, right? You know, it's always going on about the fellowship and the blood sacrifice of Christ and blah blah blah. I mean, like Jesus, you know, like give it a rest, you know, like the. I mean, if we speak, you know, it's for the sake of an audience when we're interacting with one another in a social setting. I mean, a lot of other things come to the conversation, but I'm glad that, for example, Mike Shanklin is, you know, roused this whole voluntaries network where people can talk about specific pinpointed issues that are of interest to a lot of people of like mind. You know, whether that be talking about the drug war or free market anarchism and or the free market in general, or economics and the pricing system, or the profit motive, or what, or government intervention, or a mixed economy, or whatever. You know.
Yeah, yeah. So, Lydia Glider Shelley asks, as soon or says, as soon as they forget the evils of government, they'll be repeated. And I'm not so sure that it's possible to forget the evils of government in my estimate. I don't know. Maybe.
It is when you're not, if it's hundreds of years ago and it's not the current generation. You know, if someone steps on your foot and cuts off your foot or something, you may remember it. But is your great grandchildren are going to remember that decades ago their grandfather was missing a foot? You know.
Well, let me clarify this because I believe that we're on the cusp of a change in human actual like physiology in certain respects. That we're headed towards an advancement in human.
No, 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 no,
Wait,
no.
hold on, let me finish the thought.
No, human.
Dude,
We
let me finish the freaking thought.
You sound like a sadist.
You got
Daniel, who are you?
Let me finish, damn it.
Halfield?
All right, look. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to have a society that is moving towards into an information age where we have instant access to truth through our tools that we have available to us, and that those tools will be innate in the future. That we will actually have as a part of the norm of growing up is that you'll be able to put in uh, a thing that lets you basically pull up all historical records at your own discretion anytime that you want through your glasses or through a headset or whatever, and instantly be able to pull up that kind of information. So I don't think that, given that we have the information age being so advanced where this information is stored permanently, that it's possible for a culture to completely forget about the evils of government at this point.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Well, no, I have to disagree. First of all, I'm not a Marxist, and what you said sounds very Marxian in the sense that, we progressed. Human nature is getting better. Bullshit.
No.
If
I'm
you
not.
study history badly, you will learn that human nature is pretty cyclical, and when it comes to morals, human beings are severely retarded. Human beings do not advance morally, and that is a very dangerous idea to believe that they do.
I'm not talking about the actual human being itself. I'm talking about the technology that we use as a part of our daily normal existence, and what it is to be a part of modern humanity. I mean, sure, there are areas in Africa and Asia and Australia and in South America and in Central America, whatever, where there are people who can't fathom or can't even understand the idea of carrying around a smartphone or anything similar to that as technology continues to improve. But I don't think that as we move forward in the future with the advancements that economic activity will do, that free trade will do, that this will continue to be everlasting. And if we reach the point where we have a free market environment where an anarchist free market that exists, I don't find that you're going to have a very large segment of the population that's going to exclude themselves or from the ability to pull up historical record at their fingertips. I just think that at that point, even though it's not in our own minds, it's actually in the written or electronic stuff that's out there, and once it's there, it doesn't disappear, so it's not forgotten. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I'm not changing the paradigm of we're not going to retrieve the Ubermensch.
Good.
Okay, so anyway, then the second question we had, Victor, was are there any substantial historical precedents that suggest the merit of anarchy? We talked about the history of Ireland a little bit, but not very deeply. For about 1,000 years, they had, in essence, anarchy, where property rights were still respected. You would choose your own educator or judge or arbitrator for various different issues, and you didn't have to use the same one. You could choose from a variety. Arbitration was done actually potentially by anyone in those types of situations. So the idea that there was a state or rulers in that environment, you could suggest that there were people who were of influence that would call upon people to come to war, to go against neighboring tribes that were in a danger perhaps. But I think that most of that was fear of being ostracized by women if they didn't join the military and go off to war in that type of case. But I'm not as familiar with the subject as others may be. Did you have any other examples that you would like to bring to answer this question?
Well, actually, to address that question that you're asking me now, and also just to address something that Daniel just touched on there, and the idea of the whole thing of human nature is just decrepit, and it's not going to get better. I mean, I would, if I understand you correctly, Daniel, I would take issue with that. I mean, if you look at the whole historical landscape, even dating prehistory, when we came down from the trees and walked upright, we started off in certain parts of the world of how we gained our resources was not only clubbing the other tribe member over the head. There was a time when for clubbing another tribe member over the head for his resources. There was a time in history when he was the resource. We're talking about cannibalism. So the human species advanced from that just to clubbing people over the head, but leaving the person alone and not eating them for dessert. So that was an advancement. And then we finally reached a certain stage in history when we finally clued in and clicked and said, you know what, we really don't have to club each over the head for that fire that you just ignited. I mean, you just developed the brain power to rub together or whatever to create fire in which to cook the food, which is more nutritious. So it's therefore we won't die from some kind of like poisoning. So the intellect is coming to the foreground here. Man is starting to think. They're fashioning tools to make hunting much more effective. And now we reached a stage where we don't have to kill one another. We can do this thing called trade, and there's a division of labor. And of course, there are those in the tribe, of course, who still want to continue to plunder the wealth that's created by other people. They grow into massive governments over time that started from a Bronze Age kind of a battle that was very crude and primitive, and then it became all adorned with the pageantry and symbols, and became governments, right? But these governments are a small minority. They're just a handful of people. While society starts to advance and we move forward, and as we do, these rulers, even they become, let's say, a little bit morally elevated, because instead of just like raw plundering of our wealth, there was a stage in history where they gave us a longer leash, and that, of course, caused that was the Industrial Revolution. Let's say that resulted in the Industrial Revolution, where there's an explosion of wealth because of the loosening the reins of power over us, that they were able to plunder even more. But and now we reach to the stage where we're at a government that the American Constitution, the checks and balances, that's an advancement of the human species, and even now in the modern age, when even that's becoming under the critical light, a so-called limited government, even that's under the critical light as an advancement of the human species, morally speaking, right? So all of history is an example
Well,
in
I've
microcosms or
never.
increments of anarchism.
I don't.
Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't mean to imply that human beings don't make any progress, but I think human beings in general. I don't. If you're going to say we're going to have a world where people are never going to club anyone over the head, well, I have to object to that. Or so yes, we're not. The majority of people aren't enslaving one another. Well, they are, but not cattle slavery. They're not eating each other, but they're still killing. They're still raping. They're still stealing. They're doing it. So yeah, we've advanced. Instead of raping someone in the front, we're doing it behind. But so what? That's like a small advancement.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
could.
but then moving on.
But I did want to swing it.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, moving on to the question of the historical precedents. Go ahead and give us your insights on that, if you would, Victor.
Well, I thought maybe that I had already. I mean, like there's no formal institutions of what could be called anarchist institutions. Well, I mean, maybe there are. There's private arbitration firms or whatnot. But all of history, though, insofar as we think and that we trade, and there's a division of labor, there's mutual exchanges for mutual benefit, not only in the world of commerce, but also like in personal relationships as well. I mean, like even in personal relationships, there was a time when you were married off to somebody that had to a spouse that had been selected by the tribe or by your parents. With the advancement of capitalism and individual rights and so forth, the whole idea of mating with somebody else was entirely voluntary and dependent upon the people involved themselves. So that's an example of anarchism,
Yeah.
and slipping through the cracks throughout all of history in microcosm and incrementally. So there's no one grand epoch that I could say, there was an anarchist society, but it got swept away in history or something like that. But there was a period in time when we could say it was a purist anarchist manifestation that we can speak of. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would say that at the very least we do have to at least touch on Somalia, because of course people are always asking that particular question. Well, why don't you move to Somalia? Things like that.
Right, and my response is, well, move to North Korea.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think Somalia is as much an anarchist society as North Korea. Well, look. I mean, I think it's fair. Look, if someone says to me, if you like anarchy so much, move to Somalia. I say, okay, move to China, move to Zimbabwe, move to North Korea, move to Iran, move to Iraq, move to Burma. The list goes on, or just stay here and wait.
You mean
the
because
list goes on.
What's that, Victor?
No, I'm asking you, is that like the counter rebuttal is because, well, you're the statist, so if you love the state so much, move to North Korea or whatever?
Well, that would be my rebuttal. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, to basically, first of all, Somalia is not anarchy. So it's a bad argument because it's not even an anarchist society. But even if it were, if I were to use an example of the worst government society I could think of and say, well, if you like government, move to North Korea, there would be a double standard. And they would say, well, not all governments are the same. Fine, not all governments are the same, but apparently all anarchist societies are.
Yeah, that's a good example. But the thing that I would say is that if you want to compare apples to apples, then compare the anarchy. Obviously we don't have anarchy in Somalia anymore, but we did for a period of time have some semblance of anarchy in that area, and they did actually have some respect for property rights. And during that period of time, if you compare the existence of people who lived in in Somalia to the people who lived in neighboring countries where they have an authoritarian regime, where they have governments that vary in different styles. Some are very, very oppressive. Some are not as oppressive. You will see that the growth um, of what was it, schools, the growth of hospitals, the growth of the technological sector, where as far as telecommunications, all of these sectors, there were a variety of sectors, huge number of sectors that advanced much faster than they did in their statist counterparts in the same region with the same type of uh, I don't know, cultural history, the same type of starting point when you are looking at the wealth that is in that area. We, people who are saying if you're an American and you believe in anarchy, go to move to Somalia. Yeah, Somalia is actually like really retarded when it comes to the growth of technology and their advancement of capital and wealth. They're really way behind on that, and I mean retarded as in like not like the pejorative, but I mean retarded as in like they have not grown to the same level as we have. And so why would I take a step backwards in time as far as technology and wealth in order to have freedom? Well, maybe I might, but then they also have other problems that are there from regional conflicts and
Let me also point out one thing, if you don't mind me interrupting you.
No,
There's also a double standard, because a lot of these people who say, well, if you don't like it, move to Somalia, advocate government doing things that exist in other countries. So, for instance, they'll say, well, Europe has government health care, and why can the libertarians say, well, if you like socialist medicine so much, move to Canada? Why can't we just be obnoxious like that?
Yeah, it is an obnoxious argument, but I mean, realistically, they did have some sort of anarchist society and property rights, and so they were somewhat representative. But the thing that we need to point out is, yeah, it was better than the people who were on the same page as far as wealth creation and technology. They advanced faster with anarchy than they did in these other statist regimes.
Yeah.
So, if you compare apples to apples, yes, if I was living in Iraq at the time, or Iran at the time, or Ethiopia at the time, or whatever, I would definitely move, and that's just the way it would be. But I think that we've kind of beaten that dead horse. So let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Let's see. Why would a criminal go to court in an anarchy? And Victor, why don't you take that one first?
Why would a criminal go to court in an anarchist society then, right? Well, this is supposed to say that without the almighty iron fist of the state, what's to compel anybody to do anything? Like if we're motivated to do anything, it's either because of the rewards or the punishment that can be brought down on us by the government. But that's to suggest that all our actions would be without consequence, which is ridiculous. If a person is sorry, what's the crime at hand here, or brought to court because of?
The question is, why would I submit to throwing myself into prison? I don't want to go to prison.
Well,
without government forcing me, why would I agree to?
It's not even about prison though. It's about going to court, and
court?
So yeah, court. And okay, so let's just say for the sake of argument, we have a person who they broke a contract.
Okay.
And they decided, all right, well, yeah, you paid me half up front for the deck, and you were going to pay me half on the completion of the deck. Why would I go to court? I could just keep your money.
Okay, yeah, because you don't want to encounter negative consequences. And what are some of those negative consequences that one could encounter if they, let's say that they in fact did breach a contract? A breach of contract, and then they were in the wrong, and they knew it, and therefore they didn't want to face a court or a tribunal or whatever you want to call it. Then they would take the consequences of that. The negative consequences wouldn't necessarily be maybe some state policeman coming around and arresting them and throwing them in jail. It could be, let's say, for example, their reputation is now at risk, or maybe a credit rating is now at risk. Or maybe other people don't want to do business with them because of it, or whatnot. If it becomes severe enough, there would be further impediments. There would maybe socialized ostracization ostracization. So to speak of negative consequences, look, if we're to live among other human beings and to take advantage of all of what that has to offer, the bountiful of material abundance and the division of labor, we have to get along with those people. Okay, or otherwise we can retire to a self-sustaining farm and go to Gilligan's Island, where we're not a harm or a benefit to anybody. But so long as we want to live in a modern civilized or civilization and want to confer upon ourselves all the benefits that what that has to offer, well, you have to conduct yourself in a certain manner to maximize the benefits or suffer the impediments, which does not necessarily have to be somebody using physical force against you. There's a lot of negative disincentives that should deter a lot of people. Does that begin to answer the question?
Yes, it does. One commentator, or one anarchist that I really love to go to on this particular issue is going to be David Friedman, and his idea of repeat business having incentives for creating good actors. That if I am, let's say, a credit card company, and I decide that I'm just not going to pay people, let's say, who are offering I don't know, a bed and breakfast. There's a bed and breakfast that has a certain market that's coming in, and they're providing services, and they're charging it on a Visa. And Visa says, well, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and keep their money. We're going to bill them for it, but we're not going to give you, the bed and breakfast, any of that money. They could do that theoretically, and what you'd see is that the bed and breakfast would no longer accept Visa, which diminishes the overall revenues for Visa. So there's no benefit to them that way in the long run, because the repeat business that they would get would certainly be worth more than the short-term benefit of taking the money right then. So repeat dealings, repeat interactions is where a very large percentage of this comes up. Then I guess what would we do if we had a situation where you have a business that is so significantly large and well entrenched, like, let's say, Walmart, that if they say to somebody, all right, well, what we want you to do is make 100,000 chairs and tables sets, so that we can sell them in our stores, and they get this business owner to go ahead and create all this infrastructure in order to handle this substantially large order. So they build all the, they get all this material, they get all this these factories put together, and they get all this stuff done so that they can provide these tables to Walmart. And Walmart turns around and says, you know what, actually we're going to go ahead and offer you about half of what it is that we were offering in the first place. Does this person have another outlet where he can then sell his wares? Does he have another choice? Maybe in an anarchist society I would say that they would, but let's just assume that they don't. So what do they do now? How can they avoid having incredible bankruptcy? And then also, how does Walmart get punished when they already have the established environment of stores where everybody is pretty much always going to Walmart? That's where they get their cheap goods. So I mean, you're not necessarily going to see this public outrage to come to a point where people are going to ban or protest against Walmart for having done this bad act. They're still living hand to mouth in some situations where they're going to still have to buy the products as cheap as possible, and Walmart happens to be the place to do it. So then how does Walmart end up being prosecuted, or what are their consequences in this type of situation?
Well, you said prosecuted because of this? I mean, is there a violation of NAP that you cited in that example?
Well, yeah, they're committing fraud. They're committing fraud. They promised to buy 100,000 sets of tables and chairs from this manufacturer, and at a certain price, and then when the product is produced and ready to be shipped, the representative of Walmart comes along and says, "Hey, you know what? We're going to only give you half of what what we offered." Well, they're because of their ability to find other people who will take advantage, who will try to make a deal again on the future, they may not lose out too badly if they just go ahead and take the profit and run in this particular example. Their reputation might be diminished somewhat, sure, but then it can go on for quite a while, as they will still have people trying to get that quick, holy crap, they're giving me 100,000 orders type of, I'm going to take the risk kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, the repeat dealings problem doesn't really isn't necessarily a factor for them
Oh,
because they're
yeah,
so
okay.
large.
Right. Okay. No, I understand the issue. Well, this case of fraud, as you're calling it is not so severe that they should be prosecuted to the extent of what? I don't know, like going out of business, where everybody that works for the company is out of a job or whatever. I mean, just how severe should it be? But it is true that there would be a damage to the reputation, and a reputation for a business is everything. The profit margin is something that they want to escalate, not bring down. So if they're cutting corners here and there, smart consumers are going to know it and take their business elsewhere. And there will be diminishing returns to that business because of it. Take, for example, this might be a stretch, but just let me throw it out there and see what you think. Take, for example, years ago, when some nutcase put some poison or whatever in a what was it, Tylenol or something like that?
Bayer aspirin, I think. But
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was, though, but that begat the whole thing of the seal. You have to break it to know, that it hadn't been opened previously, right? So you knew that it was safe because there was that snap of the plastic when you opened up one of these things, right? So, but that company had they took to the issue of serious damage to reputation, and repair was called for. And so it wasn't by government decree or fiat that they instituted this safe opening for it. They took that action because reputation was everything. Right? So if they had done that, if they had bypassed it or ignored that, I think that company would have gone out of business. If the word spread wide and fast about like, hey, this shit could kill you, uh, you know, don't take it, right? But for some people who might turn a blind eye, in the case that you just cited, Robert, and if they knew about it, but they said, well, what the hell, whatever, it's convenient for me, it's close enough to my home, I haven't got time to run, an hour, drive down the street to another business that's about a half an hour away, out of my way of picking up my kids or whatever. I'm going to do it. Well, that's up to we can't look at the free market as on the outside as if we were some kind of like overseers and try to cherry pick some intrinsic fairness. It's the free market is nothing more than a congregation and an assembly and amalgamation of people interacting with one another, and we make the decisions, and so far as that's taken place, voluntary, let it be, let it roll out naturally as it will, So there's no such thing as like an inherent fairness, that but any severe breaches of morality, that company will suffer, just like in the same sense that friendships can suffer if you're perpetually late for appointments. You're irking your friend. I mean, it's not severe enough to disengage from the relationship altogether. It would have to be something much more severe before it completely destroyed the friendship.
Rothschild?
Yeah, this is not a. You can give an empirical answer to this question. There's a great book, I recommend it if anyone hasn't read it, called "The Enterprise of the Law" by Bruce Benson. And what's really good about this book is that it's totally empirical. It's about the history of law. And in the book, he describes a case. I'm blanking out of the name, but there were these voluntary tribes, and you had sort of a chief that had a ruling, but it wasn't a government because you chose what tribe you wanted to be a part of, and you could if you can go to other tribes. Now, let's say there was a case, a guy, murders someone and doesn't want to go to court, or let's make the question even harder, and he doesn't want to go to prison. Well, what the court would do is they say, look, this guy is not willing to defend himself. He's not willing to even prove he's innocent or willing to go to trial. That's probably a good sign that he's guilty. And so we are not going to defend him if anyone aggresses against him. And not only are we not going to defend him, we are going to make it known and public, and now with the internet it's very easy, who this guy is, and tell other people, warning, this guy is an outlaw. He's not willing to go to court to prove he's innocent. Don't defend him. And if you go around murdering and raping and stealing, and now people know, great, now if we do vigilante justice, we can't be persecuted, we can't be charged with committing a crime. He's going to have a lot of people go after him, where now he sort of wants to go into jail because he's relatively safe. So that would be my answer to that question. But even
That's not the
if...
Walmart question.
Huh?
That's not the Walmart question.
That's not, well, I'm a rebel. I'm an anarchist. I'm answering my own questions. So, I'll answer your Walmart question. Remind me what it is, but I want to answer...
And Robert, I want to hear your answer on it.
Absolutely.
Too, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I'm answering this main question first. Why would a criminal go to court? But also, even if you're going to make the, even if you're going to say in this, and I think I gave a pretty good answer, but even if you're going to say, well, let's say the criminal is willing to risk being an outlaw, my response would be, you're allowed to use violence in defense and in reparations. If the person is charged with a crime that violates the non-aggression principle, there is no problem with the court using physical force to make sure he gets punished.
I could see that, and as far as my comment on that type of thing is that when somebody commits a, let's say for example, if they murder, they have illustrated that they do not accept the principle of self-ownership, and to be consistent, they have implicitly indicated that they do not accept the concept of self-ownership for themselves, and therefore have authorized and given an implicit permission to anyone and everyone to put an end to their life at their own discretion. And unless they want to risk that and be, if they want to risk that, that's fine. Somebody will want to just go ahead and test out their high-powered, rifle and put a bullet in his head. At some point, there will be a person who is interested in just, expressing their violent tendencies. And well, this guy's given me permission to do it, so why not? I'll go ahead and do it. And then he will face the idea, well, if I don't put myself in a position where I'm protected from these authorized killings that I gave permission to everyone to kill me, I better put myself in a I better put myself in a prison or something, where I'm protected from these people.
Yeah. Well, Robert, this becomes problematic, of course, is this person accused of murder, or is it beyond a reasonable doubt that he in fact committed murder?
We would have to assume that that they have been, proven without any, beyond a reasonable doubt that they are guilty of this. Obviously, what happens is that when we have vigilante type justice, you can get into this Hatfield-McCoy type of thing going on now. And so what I find is that when we take advantage of the specialization of labor and outsource our own grievances to other groups, then we also gain the benefit of the repeat dealings that you're going to see, where DROs are going to look at the situation and say, all right, well, this guy has his own DRO, and then they're going to come up with a negotiation, and then we're going to find that the problem is solved through market forces, where yes, I did murder somebody, and I do not want people to go ahead and kill me, so I'm going to have to come up with some sort of way to compensate the victims or the family of the victims so that they give up that. They basically give retroactive consent in a certain manner of speaking. But it's by having it be um, just a free for all. Anybody can go back and forth as far as did Joe kill Susan? Well, yes, he did. Well, then that means that we can kill Joe. And then somebody says, well, you just killed my son Joe, and so then the Hatfield McCoy problem.
Yeah, it might be a very attractive feature of a DRO that in the event of murder, that your membership to a certain DRO, that you would want that DRO to have some kind of bylaw or provision or whatever you want to call it, that 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 its members won't just pick up a gun and blow somebody away because they had been accused or in fact had murdered somebody, that we won't have this vigilante style of justice, that instead that the DRO would take care of the issue, that where it be deferred to the DRO as opposed to the private consumer of the DRO, that he himself picks up the gun. That a DRO that offered that kind of service, would be much more attractive. I don't personally think that. I think most people are repellent towards violence themselves, and that they want to delegate the retaliatory force to some other agency outside of themselves, because really a lot of people just are very squeamish when it comes to violence. This whole idea in an anarchistic society that the first disagreement would proliferate into a whole series of hundreds of peoples and battles and bloods. The first disagreement springs like a wildfire, with disagreements leading off into bloodshed, and then ricochets off and spreads throughout all the society of everybody fighting with one another with guns and battles and things like that. That doesn't speak to people. Most people just want to be happy. Some people just want to live their lives. They want to go on vacations. They want to eat their 3 squares a deal. They want to make love. They want to have babies. They want to go sailing and yachting. People don't want to have to deal with violence. So they would be happy to, instead of this kind of like, well, you forfeited your right to life because you took life, so therefore I'm just going to pick up this gun and blow you away. A lot of people wouldn't want to do that, no matter what kind of outrage that they feel towards the person. They would want to defer that to an external agency outside of themselves, I think.
I agree. So, Rothschild, back to the Walmart situation.
Yes, what was the Walmart question?
All right, let's say Walmart goes to a business and they say to them, hey, we want 100,000 table sets. We're talking 6 chairs, a full table. We want all this stuff from you. We really like the way that you do your product. We've seen it, and so what we're going to do is we're going to give you, let's say, 5,000 Bitcoin for it.
Okay.
So they make this arrangement, they make this deal with this guy and his business, and he goes to some capital investors, and he buys the materials and he buys the facilities in order to make this large order that's extraordinarily large compared to anything he's ever done before. So he goes into debt to do this, and then he provides the tables and chairs. He gets them all put together, and then when Walmart comes along for delivery, they say, you know what, we're going to only give you 3,000 Bitcoin.
Right.
Does he take the deal? Does he not take the deal? I mean, he's obviously kind of screwed because he's got all this debt that he's taken on board. What recourse does he have really? If he were to refuse to sell to them, it's not like he's got another buyer lined up that will offer him the same rate, the same price.
Well, I mean, if you have a company like Walmart, all you pretty much do is you mention this guy's name. You hire publishers to post, this guy ripped me off. He stole from me. Don't do business with this guy. You do word of mouth. You tell your friends. You say this guy's dishonest, and this guy's penny wise but a pound foolish. In the long run, this guy's going to lose a lot of money. It's not in his interest to do so.
Well, being that the company Walmart has thousands and thousands of outlets where there's where they can sell their products in their stores, they can, and they also kind of have a somewhat captured market in that they're the lowest priced provider of goods in that area. Nobody competes with them for these low prices, so they.
Well, first of all, you're thinking of Walmart now under a
Yeah,
state of society where all these barriers to entry.
yeah,
In anarchy, Walmart would probably not exist. There would probably be something even lower. I mean, I would say that Walmart gets a lot of state benefits that are shielded from protection.
yeah.
I'm not against Walmart. I like Walmart. I'm not saying that Walmart's guilty of anything, but I think if you have no barriers to entry and a truly free market, who says Walmart's going to be the lowest prices in town?
Yeah, that's where my answer comes from as well. In that, being that
I'm glad I've
Walmart,
influenced you.
yeah, Walmart is basically rent seeking. They're already taking advantage of political power and influence in order to prevent competitors from entering the market to provide products and services.
Well, in your scenario, I just thought you were leaving that to the side and just talking about a company that would do such a thing.
Yes, yes. But the thing is that when we get these types of questions, we have to argue against the initial premise. If the initial premise is wrong. And I think that all three of us would agree that in a case of an anarcho-capitalist society, we would have a significantly smaller size of business as the norm. That you would not see these gigantic oligopolies that we see in industries today, like Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile and whatever.
Right. That's why the biggest enemy of capitalism are capitalists, right?
Yeah.
They want a monopoly. They don't like competition. You know, it's weird, but a lot of people, understand that, oh, it's bad. They're spending all this money buying up politicians. Why? To have a free market? To say, don't subsidize me. Don't bail me out. That's why they're paying politicians? Come on, get real. They're paying politicians to violate the free market, to protect them from competition, to subsidize them, to bail them out.
Exactly.
The free market will punish these people, and they hate it. The biggest enemies of capitalism are capitalists.
Well, I wouldn't call them capitalists. I would.
I know I'm having a play on words, but let me be clever, okay? Shut up.
Crony capitalism, whatever crony is.
Well, I don't like the term crony capitalism.
They're fascists.
That's like calling rape crony lovemaking. Let's just call it corporatism.
They're corporatists and so on. But let's just boil down the bullet points as far as analyzing this particular point in specific.
I think we're beating this live horse.
No,
what fun is beating it?
I'm going to just do it really quick. Let me go ahead and run through it really quick. All right. Bottom line is that in an anarcho-capitalist society, you have free markets when it comes to investors, and you also have free markets when it comes to entrepreneurs. There are going to be plenty of opportunities for people to provide competition for businesses that provide products or services. So when you have a business that is going to achieve a grandiose size, it can only get to a certain point where it has the economy of scale from a business standpoint that's going to be having a manufacturing plant that actually fulfills all the needs and gets it done more efficiently than, let's say, hands-on one person working on a project, on a product. Like a car manufacturer has to have a very, significant manufacturing process in order to handle it all, so you don't have all of the costs of importing the various different parts that are necessary to go into a car. So if you put it all together in one place, you've got economy of scale, and you'll get that benefit. But after that, you start to lose money and become less and less efficient in responding to changes in market demand and regional demand. So those things that become more inefficient are going to be things like middle management. What does a middle management person do other than facilitate communication? Nothing. And so that's an outline, it's an expense that you're going to have that's going to continue to drain upon your providing the product or service at a lower price. You can't do it. It becomes more expensive. Another thing is that once a business owner becomes, or even an employee becomes a part of a successful venture, they no longer have the hungry entrepreneur type personality or situation where they are willing to pay less money for what it is that they're doing, and they want to sit back on their laurels and take vacations and do things that now that they've been successful and actually made a name for themselves in the environment. So that leaves room for the new hungry entrepreneur to take less, to be willing to sacrifice and work harder and work longer hours for the same amount of money and provide products and services at a lower price. So these factors will keep businesses at a certain small size. And being that you don't have a business that is as large and prolific as Walmart, you don't have the leverage or disparity of buying power that you would see in like the Walmart example that I gave. So not having a huge conglomerate that is so powerful kind of prevents the problem in the first place.
Very good.
All right, so then let's move on to the next question. This question was from the YouTube channel. Comment on here says the Randian objection is that competing law systems can't work because they would not recognize each other's authority, because there's no objective law. I see that you also
what
have
do you
this
think of
question.
the criticism of Randy is that there's no objective law in anarchy? That's the question?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Oh, that's a very easy one to answer. Yeah.
Well, go for it.
All right. There's no objective law under government. All right. What determines objective law? Objective law are universal rules that we all follow based on working from first principles and the ability to reason. Subjective law is this is the law because I tell you it's the law and you have to follow it or else. Right? Take the game of Monopoly, and I'll use the game of Monopoly since we're using the state. Objective law is everyone in Monopoly plays by the same rules. Subjective law is one person in Monopoly says, this is how you're going to play the game, and I'm going to play the game by different rules. Mainly, you have to give me all your money. So I would argue precisely the opposite, that you cannot have objective law under a monopolization of law and double standards where a bunch of people say, these are the rules you follow, and these are the rules I follow. Because if you acted like your government, everyone in the world would hate you, and you'd get thrown in jail. You can't print money. That's counterfeiting. Government can. That's quantitative easing. So, rape when you do it, implied consent when government does it. So there is a double standard, and so I would argue that you can...
You kind of broke off there. All right, I think that we might have lost him, so why don't you go ahead and continue on where... oh, there you're back. We lost you there.
You just conked out on your last sentence there, Daniel.
Oh, I basically said that objective law is only possible based on universal laws and the ability to reason and not having double standards. And under anarchy, you have the universal law, the non-aggression principle. But under a state, you have do as I say, not as I do. And that's not objective law at all. It's just the whims of some rulers.
Victor, what do you think?
Well, yeah, since this is an objectivist-oriented question, and it might be an advocate of adherent to the philosophy of Ayn Rand, this whole thing that in order to have objective laws, I'm much more concerned about just laws than I am about objective laws, whatever that means. So, but insofar as having, let's say, objective or just laws, that's only possible if there's one entity that monopolizes this and then decides for the rest of the population of just how that justice is constituted and what's the definition and examples of it, of objective law. Is it a case of where we're just supposed to accept it on faith, where we can understand what the justice means as individuals, and what objectivity means, that we can't understand that? So I think that just following on the coattails of what Daniel just covered, objectivism does uphold the supremacy of the thinking individual. It is only the individual who can conduct that ever so delicate process of thinking and identifying the facts and making logical connections. It's only the individual that can do that, not a group or some kind of like floating abstraction, to use the Randian terms, of this group called government, as if it were some kind of entity that is akin to Plato's philosopher king that knows what objectivity means, and only they know what objectivity and justice means. That is the business of every person to know. Every person, there's a uniformity in a lot of things. I mean, like if we're going to eat food, the uniformity there is that you cook it. You know, the uniformity of doing anything that's connected to thinking and identifying the facts of reality is that we all got onto the internet here together. We followed certain procedures, and we just didn't go willy-nilly with our emotional whims and then start yelling at our turned-off computer. We went through all the process. We all came together on this, and in a society that is able to produce goods and services to the extent that we have it today was a combination of a lot of people coming together on certain facts. I don't see why justice or objectivity all of a sudden becomes excluded from those same people, where we just can't get our head around these concepts, and that we need some mighty leviathan that is gains and establishes and maintains its power through physical force, that only it can be done through that. It's ludicrous. It's intellectual ludicrous nonsense. So
Yeah.
that's a battle that I have to that I will be taking up with Wayne Simmons in my debate with him on anarchism versus small constitutional government.
Yeah.
Well, and one more thing, also, Robert. Sorry, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
That this is quite frankly a retarded objection because,
Isn't it?
first of all, one, what makes government so special that they know objective law? I mean, if you take this criticism to its logical extreme, all government laws must be objective, right? Because only government can have objective law. Don't park Monday to Thursday from the hours of 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. How the fuck is that an objective law? So, you know, government, there's no such thing as subjective law under government, really? And you can make the case, well, the reason you need a monopolization of law is because if there's one law and only certain things are forbidden, you need one enforcer.
Well, yeah, Daniel, exactly. That's why I have.
Control anything.
That's why I have.
Control it. Huh?
That's why I have issue with this whole idea of objective law. That's why I place justice above this, whatever that means. Objective
there
law.
are
What does it mean?
other things besides justice requires objective law. Have you noticed there are no round credit cards? All credit cards are roughly the same shape, and they all fit in that ATM. No round credit cards. It's amazing. There are also no credit cards that are like 10 feet tall. Maybe we need government to assure objectivity. You know, the market can make things conform in certain ways as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that to me, the concept of objective law is obviously flawed. That there is there's going to be a subjectivity to law. You know, if let's say I don't know if you guys are familiar with the movie the Time Machine, but if you think about a society where you have a fairly sexually active group of people who have all of their needs satisfied through, I don't know, robots or whatever. In this particular case, it was you know, underground species that came up and dropped off food for consumption. But in any case, you could imagine a society where the initiation of a sexual encounter was just you just go along for the ride kind of thing. And the idea that there is something, you know, called rape in that society where people just kind of are, their mindset is, well, we're just kind of like cows in that, you know, I'm just wandering around over here and, oh, well, there's somebody there, you know, doing their thing. And, well, I'll just go along with it. This subjective value for sexual congress where one person initiates it and the other person was not, you know, all on board at the beginning, you know, when it started, maybe that ended up, you know, would be a possibility. I think that it's absolutely abhorrent, you know, as far as where we live in our society today. But each person, each society has their own subjective values as far as, you know, what things are going on. And what will happen in a free market society where you have free market justice is that you will see the price system starts to come into bear, where people will say, you know what, we are willing to pay this amount of money or personal interest or personal labor to a particular, concept, and whether it's being that you have people who no longer commit fraud and the response to fraud. How do you deal with that? Well, there's going to be a market analysis about that. The price of whatever the penalty would be for breaking a contract will be determined by a market. It's not an objective, automatically 2 times the damage is done. A lot of people really like that. If I steal your TV, I owe you the TV I stole and another TV just as a punitive measure, and then I also have to pay the cost of prosecution. Maybe that might be what the price is in a market system, but we don't, unless we actually allow people's subjective preferences to dictate how much they value the punishment of an infraction. We don't really know where the price should be. We're just taking a guess. We're taking a stab, and I don't like guesses, and I don't think that any particular monopoly can make a guess upon it. What will end up happening is that in individual encounters, you will have a guess made by an arbitrator, and they will try to analyze the situation and make it fair. And then people will see, well, no, this guy made a better guess, and we like his arbitration better. So then he starts to get more customers. People move over to him, and then the environment of arbitration changes so that we have more and more of a reflection of what it is that we as a society actually do like due to our own individual subjective preferences. So we can achieve a subjective value of justice by having a standard, though. And then the thing comes up, though. I still believe that there is the objective truth of, if you have taken an act, you have illustrated that you accept a certain premise. And if you accept that premise for your actions towards others, you've illustrated that you accept others to have the same action towards you. So if you steal somebody's property, I'm of the opinion that you have ascribed to every other person the permission to take your property.
Yeah.
So
this whole thing of I've got nothing against little o objectivity in the philosophical lexicon, but I'm telling you, man, these objectivists, man, they pounce all over that word, like objective law, objective standards of good taste and art, like it's just like, they're using it as like some kind of like religious hammer, to. But what about objective law? You can't have that in anarchist society. It's all akin to that. We can't have morality unless there's the belief in God, because objectivity therefore becomes defined as because God will burn your ass if you don't follow His edicts, right? So that becomes the objectification of law
Because he
to
loves
escape
you.
this nasty little thing called
Because
relativism.
he loves you. That's why he's doing it.
yes, of course. But we don't need to go off onto a religious tangent here.
What do you mean? It's the anarchist experience.
Yeah, we're going to save that for the atheist experience. They can go ahead and
No,
go
just
against
as an analogy, not to shift up the conversation.
yeah. All right. So let's see here. Let's move on to another question. Let's see. Would an anarchy be less safe or more safe?
That's a very easy question.
My first comment is.
Well,
Google,
I didn't hear that question.
Google
Would
democide.
anarchy be more safe or less safe?
If you Google democide, there is no obvious way you cannot see the obviousness of the answer here.
Right.
Democide
Only
is
governments
responsible
commit genocide. Only governments commit genocide. Think of the biggest mass murderers on earth: Mao, Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot. Only governments commit genocide. You kill one person, you're a murderer, and you get thrown in jail. You kill millions, you get a Purple Heart, and are celebrated as a war hero.
Yeah, it's absolutely ludicrous. Not to mention that, let's just take a look at roads, for example.
I'm against roads because I'm an anarchist.
Well, yeah, of course. We're all against roads, right? Yeah. No, where we're going, we don't need roads. The idea that the statistics on roads and deaths if you look at the private ownership of roads, where there are roads that are toll roads or privately owned roads, like you have in Orlando, where Disney is in charge of that kind of stuff, you know how the statistical ratio as far as like the number of deaths on public, government-run roads versus anarchist quote roads, it's mind-blowing. It's like there's almost none on privately owned and privately managed roads, but I think it's like 64 people a day die on American roads.
There's more than that.
Thousands
a year. It's thousands a year, so it's certainly more than 64 a day.
Yeah, well, maybe it was like 64 an hour. I don't remember, but it's just such a ridiculous number.
That seems a bit too much. Yeah.
But it is this. It's like this ridiculous number, and I got all these thoughts, things in my head that I can't remember specific details on every single one of them off the top of my head. I'd have to do a little research to find out what that number is. But Google is your friend, so pop it in there and find out how many people on an annual basis die on roads that are owned by the governments of various different locales.
Gustav Molinari put it best. Anarchy is no guarantee that some people won't murder and steal. Government is a guarantee that some will.
Yep, that's true. Absolutely. Also, I mean, we've got the issue of regulation over drugs and things of that nature. Well, we know for a fact that the United States government and the FDA have prohibited certain drugs which are in use in other countries that are helping people who are in death's bed, who are going to die if they don't get a treatment. These drugs are tried, and they sometimes work. In very certain occasions, they do actually save lives. And then in the United States, you can't use those drugs because they haven't been approved. Well, then every single person who dies from that disease who might have lived with the approval of that drug and the use of that drug is a death that's on the statist's hands. It is a government-caused death. In a free market where you actually have the ability for a competing interests to actually create regulation and oversight that actually is very profit-driven on both sides, you get more accurate information. You've got insurance companies that don't want to pay out for losses for bad products, that are going to force businesses that create products to ensure that they have good quality products. You have the business interest where the person who's running their business doesn't want to lose their customers because they create a product that ends up not working the way it's supposed to. And then you also have the consumer's interest to try anything that can work to solve their particular issue, and they're willing to take risks. So you've got a lot of different factors that influence this, but instead, if you have a government official that's basically in charge of it, they've only got one interest. If I approve something and it kills a lot of people, I'm screwed.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jan Helfeld interviewed me. Well, he didn't interview me. I was on a show where he wouldn't talk and he would not shut the hell up, and it was really irritating. And he drove me crazy, and not because I disagree with him, but because he's just obnoxious. But I asked him during the interview, there are 200 countries in the world. Name how many do not violate people's rights. Name one government that does not currently violate people's rights out of the 200. And he admitted that all of them violate people's rights.
Yeah.
At the same time, saying that we need government to protect people's rights.
40 minutes later.
Huh?
He
Sorry, what did you
admitted
say,
40
Victor?
minutes later when you have to practically drag the answer out of him.
Well, yeah, he admitted none. There are none. So government violates people's rights, and we need government to protect people's rights. We need people who violate people's rights to protect people's rights. Fine. We need Charles Manson to make sure that other people don't harm one another. That's what you sound like.
Well, I mean, I would say that actually I don't think that argument is a particularly strong one, because they can say, well, show me an example of an anarchist society that has existed, and you can't.
Well, no, I'm not saying the lack of something existence is proving its failure. I'm saying the fact that government violates people's rights is proof that government is not a protector. I'm not saying that we can't have a limited
Right.
government because it doesn't exist. I'm saying the fact that every government that has ever existed violates people's rights proves that government is not your friend. That
Right.
government is a violent,
Hey,
coercive.
You're asking the same question he asks when he does his interviews, in a certain way. You know, if you have a if the purpose of your institution is to protect people's rights, can you protect those rights by violating them?
Yeah. Well, we can do a whole debate on Jen Helfeld. I was able to get Jen Helfeld to admit that under certain circumstances it's okay to rape. So at the end of the day, this is really they're you know this is really the limited government. I mean, hopefully it's just Jen Helfeld and not all limited government people who will say it's okay to rape. But that really proves how really that at the end of the day, not friends of liberty.
All right, and back to the question about would
I'm just
anarchy be more or less safe? From you, Victor, what do you think?
oh well, definitely more safe. It's anarchism or free market capitalism is not offering a Garden of Eden in which nobody doesn't stub their toe or in which there isn't a violation of the NAP. Of course, like violence and disagreement and strife and unhappiness or whatever are here to stay. It's written into the fabric of things, though. But it's ludicrous, though. It's ludicrous. Look there is only freedom and slavery. There's only voluntary lovemaking or rape. There's no middle ground. Now, just because you have an anarchist society in which things can go awry, the solution is not to say, well, you see, it doesn't work. What does that mean it doesn't work? Of course it works. Just because it's something where there isn't theft still going on, the solution is not to, therefore, to institute at the very epicenter of society a violent organization that is violent by nature, not that it just commits perpetual acts of violence. It's violent in nature. The establishing and the maintenance of a state that holds a monopoly over violence is not the solution to a society that can have violence internally within it. So because any kind of like ill effects that a so-called private citizen can affect will pale is nothing but a smidgen to the enormous evil that governments perpetrate on the entire playing field. Nothing.
Absolutely.
They are without equal. They are without competitors, and that is not a solution to the problem of violence that will be a characteristic even in an anarchist society. But that does not invalidate an anarchist society just because you will still have these social ills.
Yep, absolutely. Well, obviously, this kind of provides a nice little segue into another question. He says, "Do you see anarchy as a glorious utopia, or just better than what we have today?" And I think that we kind of answered that with well, it's it's just better than what we have today. We're not going to make everyone into angels who never hit, steal, or cheat. It's just a fact that some people will do. There will be some bad actors. Do you all agree?
Yes, utopia is not an option. Which is why anytime someone says, well, how do you solve this problem in an anarchist society? How do you solve this problem in an anarchist society? How do you solve this problem? And then they call us utopian? We can't solve every problem. But it starts with let's not violate people's rights. Let's not initiate aggression. Let's start by acting morally. And that's it. Yes, you're not going to have utopia. But my view, people say, well, if you get rid of the government, what? People are not going to kill anymore? They will. Getting rid of the government is like executing a mass murderer. Now he's dead and he can't kill anyone anymore. So you're not going to get rid of all violence in the world. It'd be nice, but it's not realistic because there are always going to be human beings which violate other people's rights. But you're going to have less, and it's getting rid of one violent entity reduces violence. So yes, utopia is not an option, and the pursuit of utopia has always created dystopias.
All right. And Victor, you would agree?
Well, yeah, like And the question really subsumes a lot of things, and it's philosophizing midstream, because it is like when people hear of this, the idea of anarchist society, they have a certain view of human nature. I'm not really picking on you, Daniel. You haven't really fleshed it out. We can have that conversation later. But most people just assume they have this whole. They take to the question. They already have such a bag full of philosophical junk roaming around in their head. Some of that being their views of human nature, which is innately decrepit. So, with the exception of with the government, though, because that's a purified Platonic form that's purified with made up of nothing but philosopher kings who are morally pure, right? But they come to the question with a baggage full of false and rotten philosophical premises, and one of those premises is that human nature is so decrepit. And here's the naive anarchist coming along and saying, "Oh, the problem's only government. So once we get rid of government, everything will be utopian and beautiful, and we'll all be dancing around in the lily fields and kissing and hugging one another." That's what they think. You see how stupid and retarded they are?
Yeah.
But don't they know anything about human nature? So you really got to dig deeper on these philosophical questions than philosophizing midstream.
Yeah. No response, Daniel. You'll have to have that conversation elsewhere.
All right.
Yeah, there is a question that came in from the YouTube comments, and Kyle James wants to know, is anarcho-communism an oxymoron or a possibility? And Daniel, if you would like to go first on this one.
Well, you have to define your words. If you define anarcho-communism as a society where everyone in the world is communist,
not everyone, just a commune.
A small commune?
It doesn't have to be small. It's
if it's voluntary, it's not an oxymoron. Look, a kibbutz in Israel is communistic. There are communistic frat houses. A family is communistic often. But these are voluntary. You can leave. You're not forced to join them. Well, a family is sort of forced to join them. But you can leave. So as long as if it's not coercive, I don't think it's an oxymoron. But when you hear socialism or when you hear the term communism, someone on a Facebook message said, "Keep your socialism to yourself." And I responded, if it was socialism, they couldn't keep it to themselves. So when you normally hear that word, it is you must be part of our commune, whether you want to or not. And
right.
So if you're saying, well, you must have a commune, then it is an oxymoron, because saying I must do something and you're violate my freedom of association. To me, an anarchist is defined as someone who believes in a freedom of association consistently. So any organization that does not respect freedom of association is not anarchist.
And Victor?
Well, yeah, this whole idea of communes, just like Daniel was talked about, is fine. If there's a group of people with long, shaggy hair listening to the Grateful Dead, and if they want to have a communal toothbrush that they pass around and throw their collective efforts into one pot, and nobody says the word mine or property, so long as it's voluntarily, go ahead. But anarcho-communism, though, that's not in the sense that we're talking about. They're talking about it as a political movement, which is a very different story.
How could it be anarcho if it's a political movement?
Well,
they're taking the whole.
I mean, no, Chomsky calls himself an anarchist, and there's one video where he's saying how we need a central bank and we can't end the Fed. So he's a very confused man. We need a central bank, and he's an anarchist?
All right, but Victor, specifically, do you think that if you're going to say that anarcho-communism is a political movement, to me, the concept of anarchy requires that it be an apolitical movement.
Yeah,
so how
can
it be a political movement?
Well, this is the thing that's hurled at a lot of anarcho-capitalists all the time, is that apparently we've preempted the purity, the ideological purity of anarchism. which is not the case at all. There was side by side with I can't remember his name now, but who basically wrote "Property is Theft," and anarchy means no rulers, no hierarchy. So therefore, any kind of form of hierarchy, whether you find that in a business or in the family, boo hiss, that's the bad thing, that's got to go. But the hierarchy of which the anarchist opposes, the anarcho-capitalist opposes, is violent hierarchies, because it violates the non-aggression principle. But in the Proudhon, I think it was, is his name. So there were the individual anarchists side by side with the anarcho-communists who did speak against hierarchy and all its meanings of the word, and they spoke against all of that, though. But the anarcho-capitalist is just saying, you know what, forget about these other hierarchies. You know, the guy who hires somebody to do some more work for him, for a company, and he's the boss and he's giving the direction or whatever. So what? You know, it's still voluntary. That's all that matters, right? So so these different stripes of anarchism, it's not necessarily that they have to expunge the word anarchy from communism, but what has to be expunged is the communist part when it comes to a political movement. I mean, if they want to get rid of hierarchy and businesses, then they can join the communes which we just previously talked about.
Well, the thing that I would say is, and I guess we're going to have to wrap this up. We're reaching the end of our show. So the thing I would have to say is that, bottom line is, if you are an anarchist, and I don't believe that capitalist needs to even be added to it, but unfortunately, because of the previous use of the term, we have to. But if you are an anarchist, this means you are not going to prohibit other people from doing what it is that they are going to do. So if you are an anarcho-capitalist, you do not stop people from making communes. If you are an anarcho-communist, you do not stop people from using money and trading and owning the fruits of their labor if they so choose. And if you are an anarchist, you don't necessarily go and say, well, you can't be racist and be an anarchist. This is, you can't be a sexist and be a racist. Well, those things are probably not something I want to be a part of, and I can choose to avoid those people. I don't have to be a part of that. But I'm not going to, tell everybody that you have to think this particular way. That's the authoritarian view. And so
your employer is not your ruler.
That's right. That's right. So just before we go, if you guys have any shows or any upcoming events that you would like to mention, I'd like to go ahead and hear that. Daniel?
Well, I have a YouTube channel, Daniel the Sexiest, as you can no doubt tell. And you don't have to laugh. And I will be doing a show Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think I might have a friend on who will talk, I think, about, he wants to talk about land tax.
Yeah, we got to go really fast.
The topic. Huh?
We got to go really fast. Got to go really fast.
All right, so come and join that 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same channel, different person.
Okay. Me. And Victor, really quick, you got a minute.
Yeah, for sure. There's the show that I do with Michael Shanklin every Sunday. What is it? 10
p.m.
10 p.m. Yeah, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That's right. Yeah, and particularly looking forward to my debate with minarchist, objectivist minarchist Wayne Simmons on Tuesday on Voluntary Virtues Network. So tune in for that.
And of course, we hear I hear at Voluntary Virtues and the Anarchist Experience. I hope that you will join us again here on next Sunday. We're here on 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday, going till 6. So please join us again, and next time, hopefully, we will have the phone system working so you can call in with your questions. Thanks for joining us, and have a great evening.
Ta-da!